Hi guys, welcome to Brecon Radnor Question Time 2021. Can you just go around the table and just introduce yourself, please?
Okay, I'm John Muir. I've come from Montgomery, and I'm here because, well, let's wind the clock back 500. How long have I got for introduction?
About 90 seconds.
90 seconds, right. Wind the clock back 500 years. There was reformation required in the religious context. So I was full on with Luther. Wind the clock forward to where we are now, and there's reformation required in the political politics of this country. So I'm for Reform Party, which is a new oil bloc, and is here to rearrange a few deck chairs. Thank you.
Sir.
My name is Stephen Morris. I'm standing in for the Glard candidate, a gentleman by the name of Sam Hollowell. Sam is 18 years old, just turned 18, so he may very well be the youngest candidate in the country. And he's in the middle of his A-levels, which is why I'm standing in for him this evening. But people won't be familiar with Glard. We're a new party. We are a conservative party, that is to say we believe in stable families and stable communities. But we're also a nationalist party. We believe that Wales is a nation, nations ought to be independent, and an independent Wales run on conservative principles would be a success. And that's what I'm representing here this evening.
I am Emily Durrant, so I'm the Green Party candidate. I'm also the lead list candidate for the Mid and West Wales region. I live in Llangorse with my two little boys. I'm a single working mother, and I'm here to bring climate change and nature to the heart of all decision making, and to push for a more equal Wales.
Noswaith, good evening. My name is James Evans and I'm the Welsh Conservative Party candidate. I live locally to here in Bulth with my family and my daughter, and I am standing in this election because I want to make a real difference for our community here in Brecon and Radnor.
Hi, I'm Grumble Ham. I'm a Brecon resident. I'm standing for Plaid Cymru. I have been living and working in the area for about the last 15 years. I've spent much of my career setting up not-for-profit businesses. We've won quite a lot of national innovation prizes, and I want to bring a level of innovation and science to the Senedd, because ultimately I'm desperately concerned about the future of my region, my three children.
I'm William Powell, the Welsh Liberal Democrat candidate in this election. I'm a county councillor locally and have been for 17 years now. My family have farmed in the Brecon Beacons and the Black Mountains area for longer than I would care to recall for generations. I'm standing in this election because it's absolutely essential that we have a strong voice for the communities, the diverse communities of Brecon and Radnorshire that have been well served by parties in the Liberal tradition since the days of Richard Lidsey up to and including the outgoing MS Kirsty Williams. I look forward to taking part this evening.
Thank you guys. First question from Chris Penny in Brecon. What is your response to Labour pushing through giving 16-year-olds a vote without proper debate or consultation to the Welsh people? So.
I think it's outrageous. I think anything like this, and I would apply the same response to the way in which the Welsh Government has steamrolled the issue to do with education, and in particular sex education, steamrolled through without taking into consideration what families have to say about how their children should be educated on the specific subjects of sex education and faith. So I'm all in favour of these kinds of essential subjects for discussion to be discussed on a wider basis as possible, and to be recognisably part of the soul, because it's an important thing, the soul of the nation.
Thank you.
Well, I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she often hears politics discussed over the dining table. And yet she told me just a few days ago that she doesn't feel that she would be in a position at all to cast a vote. And it seems to me clear that the Labour Party have taken this move rather cynically on the assumption that young people, 16 and 17-year-olds in particular, are more likely to vote Labour than they might do for another party. I think that they might find out that that's mistaken, because certainly here in Gwlad, we're finding a lot of support amongst young people. I've already mentioned that our Brecon Radnor candidate, Sam Holwell, who I'm standing in for this evening, is very possibly the youngest candidate in the country, having just turned 18. A gentleman called Calin Jones, who's been number 1 on our South Wales East list, has also just turned 18. So I think the Labour Party may well find that the 16 and 17-year-old vote doesn't go in the way that they expect. We'll find out soon enough.
Thank you, sir.
I am so thrilled for 16 to 17-year-olds. I just want to say, congratulations. I wish that I had this opportunity when I was that age. I would absolutely have been ready, and I have complete faith in you. I am so looking forward to the turnout. And I just want to say that I'm so sorry that you've been let down. You've been let down by generations of politicians, but also just generally people, by all of us really. You've been lumbered with the climate crisis, you've been lumbered with the nature crisis, and now you are lumbered with the debt from a global pandemic, which we should have been better prepared for. So this is your chance to get involved and have a say in your future. You deserve this. You deserve to have a hand in what happens in your future. So go to the polls and make that choice and enjoy it and celebrate afterwards.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. I think vote to 16 is a very interesting topic. I think it needed more consultation. I think we need to look at actually having more political education in our schools so younger people can make an informed choice. When I was 16, I was quite politically active, I was quite interested in politics, so I think I could have made an informed decision. But I think more consultation, more education is needed, so young people are informed about all the political choices and all the political parties before they go and vote, because I think sometimes they may be able to be influenced by factors outside of their control.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, I'm massively in favour of 16-year-olds getting the vote. And I think it's up to the government of the day to be able to make those decisions. They were put in 5 years ago. I have huge faith in them. I think it actually warms my heart. Some of the social movements that the young people are taking part in now will make a fundamental difference, and they do strike me as a generation that have been let down by the last 20 years of government. Emily mentioned some of it, but equally, what age would be appropriate? At the age of 17, they're told by the government they must decide that they're going to take on £50,000 worth of debt for education. So, but are they still too young to vote then? I think it's when you put into context the decisions the state forces them to make at the age of 17, giving them the right to vote at 16 isn't a big leap.
Thank you, Randall.
I think it's actually rather patronising to 16 and 17-year-olds to think that they're not capable of exercising a vote. They're capable of. We're in a garrison town of Brecon with a proud military tradition. People can enter the armed forces. They can do a whole range of really important things. It's absolutely vital that we do have votes, and we've now got them here in Wales because elections have been devolved to the Welsh Parliament. I find myself in agreement with James on the point about the need for greater civics and political education, and that's obviously a difficult thing to deliver because of the sensitivities around it, but we're in a particularly difficult place this time because this first vote is going to be exercised at a time when my own son has recently turned 18, and he and his contemporaries have not had the opportunity to be in school, to have discussions, to have sort of structured debate outside the classroom as well as inside. And so that's a challenge, but I certainly welcome it. It's a great step forward, and it certainly wasn't just an initiative of Welsh Labour. There was a much broader coalition within the Senedd that supported this, and I've seen the Welsh Youth Parliament in operation from its first day it's met to its final session very recently, and we could learn a lot from them too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Karen? Karen, just give you the question. I'll answer it again. What is your response to Labour pushing through giving 16-year-olds a vote without proper consultation and debate?
Perhaps, I'm not quite sure who did they actually consult with. Did they actually, must have met 16-year-olds to actually get them on board? I know from the Valleys areas that we did establish the first youth council and met with, what's the lady now? It's my Valerie, Alexandra's sister. Met on Birmingham to the Man area, or Bedros it was, going towards the Westland. And I'm very much for young people being on board. I think if they can push it through, as you say, without too much consultation, then obviously there are things to be learned for the next intake, shall I say, of quota. And it would be good to evaluate exactly how they put these young people together. But for me, having experience working with disadvantaged young people in sort of Merthyr Tydfil area and across Morgan, and also with advantage and the actual gelling together and the how it builds their character and what input they can actually feed back to the adult politician, you know. It's something that we should take on board, because at the end of the day, you know, they're young people, but sometimes they talk no sense. With respect. And, you know.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. Bit of a Johnny-come-lately, I suppose, to the introduction scene, seeing as you've all done yours. I'm Liz Davis. I'm the relatively new editor of the Brecon Radnor Express. Although I've been in position now for a year, this is actually the first time I've met anybody face-to-face in Brecon. So thank you very much to Andy for organising audio politician for me. So, thank you. You just answered questions about 16-year-olds getting the vote. So our first sort of set of 3 questions are going to be from 16-year-olds who are going to be voting for the first time in this election. The first one is from Eleni Coleman, who's 16, and she wants to know, how high up on your agenda is climate change, and how do you propose to tackle this emergency?
We start with this gentleman. Sorry.
So thank you for your question, Renee. Yes. Here in Wales, we see climate change as something which could potentially have a very damaging impact upon Wales, particularly upon the Wales countryside. And I need to explain what I mean by that, because you hear a lot about the term net zero in connection with carbon emissions. The very important word in net zero is the word net, because it doesn't mean cutting our carbon emissions to zero. It means that when activities take place which cause carbon to be emitted, then you also need to have things taking place to absorb carbon, which very often is going to mean planting trees. Now, here in Wales, we've got a lot of quite sparsely populated areas, and we in Gwlad see it as a real danger that if we're not careful here in Wales, we could become the carbon sink for the rest of the UK. So in other words, heavy industries in Wales such as steel, aerospace, things which generate carbon dioxide are going to find themselves priced out because of energy taxes and so on. And at the same time, our agricultural communities in Wales are in danger of coming under pressure from those who just want to clear agricultural land in order to grow trees as a carbon sink. We see that as a real danger for Wales, and it's something which we're strongly opposed to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for such a brilliant question, and it won't surprise you to know that the Green Party manifesto is completely centred around responding to the climate emergency and the nature crisis. So, of course, I would encourage you to have a good read of it. But in brief, we centre our whole plan on a Green New Deal for Wales, and that has a whole series of plans within that. But things like the Green Transformation Fund for Wales, which is investing in green bonds for major infrastructure projects, but also transformation in food and farming, which looks at a more integrated farming system based on agroecology. So we're not looking at big investments to plant trees from outside of Wales. We're about community-based, bottom-up changes and transformation. I mean, we have such a huge suite of pretty much every single facet, from healthcare to social care. It's all based around the climate emergency, so it's very hard for me to pick one thing, but please do take a look at the manifesto. We have the most ambitious carbon net zero targets of all the parties, so we are absolutely committed to that goal, yes.
Thank you, Emily. James?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think no one can deny that climate change is the biggest threat facing us as we go forward. And I was very pleased when I was the Cabinet member in Powys County Council to be responsible for climate change. And I set up a climate change working group to look right across the council at how we could address and make the council more greener, whether that's looking at our street lighting and our highways, how we can make that more greener. But as well, we need to look at more renewable energies and actually looking at hydro, for example, looking at our fleet, and we can move to more of a hydrogen car system as well. We've got a great company in Landrinda, River Simple, who are pioneering that going forward. There are lots of things we can do to try and improve the climate, because we need to make sure we leave this world in a better place and look for the next generation.
Thank you, James. Granville?
So yeah, it's essential. I will frame it because it's the climate crisis as well as the ecological crisis. It's the entire natural world is under huge stress. How important is it to me? 25 years ago, I was doing core sampling, looking at sea level rise. I've spent around 20 years developing green energy technology, including winning, at the time, the UK's biggest ever climate change prize. And I was also the first person in the UK to given a royal honour for their work in the green tech sector. It's fundamental to what I do. It's why I'm so pleased to have helped develop the Clyde Manifesto, which I believe is genuinely groundbreaking and realistic, using my experience and all the other people that are involved in the sector in putting forward a roadmap so how we can decarbonise by 2035. And part of that is also making sure that the wealth of this is actually shared equitably amongst the people, and making sure that the jobs and the training is there for our next generation, because genuinely we have the resources in Wales to easily do this, alongside the Nature Act, Recovery and Biodiversity. But we have the ability. I mean, the future economy is going to be biotech and green tech, pretty much the only thing that matters. Unless we have a government that's clued up to this, we're going to miss a great big window.
Thank you, Granville. William?
Lots of very important points have been already made on this by previous speakers. When I was around the age of the questioner, I first became aware of the work of Petra Kelly, the pioneer of the Green Party in Germany. And there's a particular phrase that sticks in my mind in the original German: Wir haben die Erde von unseren Kindern nur geborgt, and that means we have only borrowed the earth from our children. And that was in the early 80s. Now we're decades on, and it's becoming much clearer quite how urgent the crisis is that we face. The Welsh Liberal Democrats are very committed indeed to addressing climate change, and we've got a multi-billion-pound programme proposed and costed in our manifesto to address this. We need to decarbonise transport, we need to localise and make more resilient the farming sector, we need to reduce food miles, we need, amongst other things, to explore ways in which farming can be even more environmentally creative and sensitive than it is. And crucially, we also need to produce more of our energy through renewable methods, and we've got fantastic natural resources in this nation of ours, and we've got to take that forward more intensely now than we have in the past.
Thank you, William. Harry?
How do you follow that? Actually, obviously, these people, my colleagues here, are very well versed in climate change. I myself would be know a little, but look forward to actually working with 16-year-olds up to whatever age to develop some of the climate change policy, and to work with those, if successful, to get to the Senedd, to actually work with those in the Senedd who are the experts, and also out in the field here in Brecon Radnor. I do know that obviously with the farming communities, that ideally perhaps that we should be looking to produce more food within the area, so that set up cooperatives, so we sell within Brecon Radnor. and that actually will obviously cut on the carbon emissions, not having to take livestock to market, or livestock to abattoirs, which are far away, although we are lucky to have got them in Talga, granted. But there's also things to learn as well together. This is an education journey for myself. I'm always open to learning, but it's an education journey for everyone. I mean, about sort of the ways of farming, the way that we actually navigate ourselves out of COVID now. You know, without the aircraft, so the freedoms from the aeroplanes and what have you. I mean, you've seen this sort of effect. I mean, I'm asthmatic, and I know that the air was far better when you didn't have aeroplanes shooting above us in the sky. So, I mean, it's all about education, isn't it? It's about looking at different ways of doing things. And whilst I know, obviously, there is hope by many to build these massive forestries, I must admit, I love trees. I saved a 650-year-old oak tree from being cut down in Irwood. So, you know, I do have a passion for trees, and obviously, the fact is we wouldn't be here today because of the trees giving up the oxygen to the leaves or whatever.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
John?
Do you know, I don't think I can add anything to what I just said. Brilliant. You know, I've honestly run out of steam. You'd be delighted to hear this, because I'm sure you don't want to hear anything more than me.
Thank you, John.
But I will say one thing, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you off that later. It's a balancing act. Like everything in life, it's a balancing act. Okay? So I'd say two things. First of all, climate change has been with us since day one. That's the first thing. How much of it is man-made or woman-made is another matter, as you're aware. But what I'm looking for is change in our own individual persons, the way we look after the environment, the way we don't become consumers, endless consumers every day. That's the second point. There's one more to come, I'm sorry. The third point is that if we expect that we're going to get all the energy we require for a very, very sophisticated economy, as we go into some fairly turbulent times, these are the facts. The economy is in a turbulent state. If we expect to get it all from renewables, then we're living in comfortable now. We need to have a balanced energy supply, which includes everything that we have on offer at the moment. So whilst I'm in favour of renewables, don't imagine that will be the be-all and end-all.
Thank you, John. Next question, Liz.
No hot air from the Brecon Radnor Express, that's it. Second question is from Caris Kramer, and Caris is 17. And she says, we hear a lot about priorities from the various parties and where money is going to be directed to, but no one says where the money is being taken away from. So how does this work out?
Can we start with Emily?
You're absolutely right, and I suppose when a party's putting together their manifestos, you're always focusing on the great stuff that you want to do. But I think the really important thing to say here is the Green Party manifesto and everything that we believe in is about being preventative. So we're really, really passionate about turning the tap off on bad health by instead of we make healthcare about wellness, not about illness. So we want to create healthy environments and healthy spaces so that we get ill less. We want to change the economy into a well-being economy. We want to embed the well-being economy. It's something actually that Labour has proposed and started to adopt, but haven't actually put it into practice at all. And there are countries all over the world already adopting the well-being economy. So we'd like to see it as something that we are freeing up a lot of money in just embedding the preventative principle, which is part of the Future Generations Act.
Thank you, Emily. James?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've got to look at the way the Welsh Government is structured at the moment. There is far too much bureaucracy in Welsh Government. You've got to look at education, for example. There's a number of bureaucrats sat in Cardiff Bay which actually take money away from frontline teachers, which is wrong. I think we need to slim down the Welsh Government. I also need to look at the amount of money Welsh Government have had additional provided by the UK Government, which they haven't actually allocated yet and just sat in some bank account somewhere, wait for the next term of Parliament. That's when we want to look at where the money's going to come from. And also to stop wasting money on vanity projects which go nowhere. We see the M4 Relief Road and the amount of money that was spent to develop that project, but nothing come of it. It's just complete and utter waste of money all the time. It's bad government, and that's why after May 6th we need a new government who's going to have good government for Wales and a government that works for the whole of Wales and not just below the M4 corridor.
Thank you. Randall?
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. It's a fascinating question because this is the mentality we have to have in Wales, which is, well, if you want to do something good and exciting, you have to cut the money from elsewhere, which is very unique. There aren't many countries in the world that aren't allowed to do things like borrow money to create a tidal lagoon that we know will create revenue and create jobs and create more wealth for our country. We're not allowed to borrow money for new hospitals or for things like furlough to support our most vulnerable people through a very difficult year. So we're anomalous, but it comes from that current constitutional settlement that we have. But that's not to say that borrowing is the answer to everything. You can do things sensibly. I used to work in local government, and we often see at the end of the year people would say, got to spend the money now because otherwise we won't get it next year. So Clyde have made a commitment that actually every year, every government, every department across all governments must do their budgets from scratch. We don't have this retained budgets that go on year on year. There's been a commission that's been produced recently that says there's about 5%, about 6% of wastage in the NHS, so we'd look to reduce that by 1% a year and then reallocate that into preventative health measures, for example, which we know is going to further reduce the burden on the NHS. It's about, the whole purpose of government is to use money smartly, thinking ahead, not just reacting on a year-by-year basis.
Thank you, Randall. William?
This is a really, really important question. It's important that the questioner can kind of look into the whites of our eyes as we answer it, because there's a lot in what, particularly what Emily said with regard to the potential of the Future Generations Act to enforce wise, long-term decision-making rather than the sort of stop-start approach and the commissioning of endless consultations that go nowhere. Waste huge amounts of resource. We need to have this founded on what she termed and is termed in the Act a well-being economy. We also need to have a much lesser medicated approach in the health service, because the multi-million pound wastage of prescriptions that are no longer required, repeat prescriptions coming out all the time, and also the tendency to throw pills and throw medication at every condition rather than adopting a preventative approach. And that's something that I know is really embedded locally in the Brontes Wellbeing Park project, and it was my privilege to be at that event the other day, which was addressed by Sophie Howe, who's our Future Generations Commissioner. We also need to have far more effective scrutiny, and we need that scrutiny not only at Welsh Government level, but we need to have far more effective, efficient scrutiny at County Council level. There are examples, and not very far from here, of schemes that have been a serious sink of cash, and there are questions that need to be answered, both in Cardiff Bay and close to home.
Thank you, William. Aaron?
Well, as a former local government officer, county councillor over the last 3 years, and 18 years in what I was the management team. I mean, we've learned that we've got to look for every penny that we can find, whether it's actually recycling or whether it's actually looking for the best procurement. So I think as far as actually looking at what saving, is looking for where the waste is and being more accountable for the public purse. Because every penny counts, and when you're talking about millions of pennies that are not accounted for, then that does actually leave a bitter taste in my mouth. So I think as well, what needs to be done for me is an evaluation of exactly the services that are being delivered and working with the people on the ground to actually find out what they want and what actually works for them. Because quite often, whether it's to do with highways work, you talk to people actually out there on the roads doing the work, and the saving ideas they come up with, or the waste money the money that's being wasted, that could be spent in other aspects of the county council, for example. is crucial. You know, it's actually money that we desperately need. So I don't think we talk enough between, you know, with the actual practitioners, with the actual people on the ground. It's all right for people in ivory towers to say, well, we think this is best, or we think that, or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's all about communication, and it's all about evaluation, and continuous reviewing where we're at. And sadly enough, it doesn't go on enough. There was a doctor, actually one of my doctors in both Wales, who I went to as a patient, and I came out of there saying to him, are you feeling better now, doctor? Because, to be honest, okay, he opened up about an issue where he was wanted to do preventative heart conditions, prevent heart attacks. And he said, and he was told, when he went on to Cardiff, he was told that don't even go there, you know, and more or less a warning to leave the project behind. Yeah, and it's not on.
John?
All I'd say is the party's over. We're talking 1945, 1990. The economy is in a very, very precarious state. So I'd encourage everybody to look at their own budget. This is where we take back control of our own lives. And we don't spend money, Vanity Fair money, which is what's gone on in Downing Street this last few weeks. We all know the Pilgrim's Progress story, I'm sure. It's Vanity Fair that we've been living in. And so this is an interesting time, because the election's coming at a very, very unusual time, given what's going on in Westminster. And I regret to tell you what you guys, that it's Westminster that's part of the problem. So it's a moment for Wales to rise to the occasion, rearrange its deck chairs, and no longer point that way, which is Titanic, right? And clasp the neck of the balanced budget. We can't have everything. We have to live within our means. We get a bad example from Westminster, so let's set an example in Wales. Let's rise to the occasion. Let's bury the past and resurrect our lives.
Thank you, John. Stephen?
I'd like to thank Karen for an extremely perceptive question, because for a party standing for election, it's the easiest thing in the world to make promises to spray money around all over the place. But that money has got to come from somewhere. And in Wales, we have a number of particular difficulties as a country. We have a much larger public sector, that is to say, a much bigger government than most countries in Europe and in the rest of the UK. And in Gwlad, as I mentioned earlier on, we are a Conservative party. We believe in making the government smaller. Also in Wales, one of the biggest impediments to independence is the fact that we have a budget deficit. That is to say, more government money is spent in Wales every year than is raised through taxes. And for Wales to prosper as an independent country, that does need to be addressed. So in Gwlad, our approach to this is if we want to shrink the government, we want the public sector to be smaller, in particular we want the third sector to be smaller, because there are a lot of organisations, many of them ostensibly charities, which actually receive their money directly from the government, and very often are run by people to whom essentially the Labour Party owns favours, if it is as lovely as that. The other thing to say is that ultimately, in any economy, there is only one source of funding which it takes to run the country successfully, and that is economic growth. And in Gwlad, we are very focused on making Wales a place where businesses can grow and succeed, where people can increase their personal wealth, where there's opportunities for people to start businesses, to grow businesses, to be taxed fairly for doing so, and for that to be the source of the government expenditure in Wales.
Thank you, Stephen.
The next question is from Amelia Giordano, who she's 17, from Brecon. And she says, as a young person voting for the first time in this election, my question is, young people tend to feel like they can leave politics to the adults. Why should young people go out of their way to vote for you?
James?
Thank you. I don't think politics is for adults. I think politics is for absolutely everybody. As I was actively involved in politics and I wasn't allowed to vote. And I think people should vote for me. I'm probably, other than our Gwlad candidate, the second youngest candidate here. I want to make a real difference for young people's lives in Brecon and Radnorshire. I know firsthand what it's like. I can't buy a house in Brecon and Radnorshire. I'm renting because of the state of the housing market here. there's no jobs for our young people locally. We need to get more jobs in the area to keep our local young people here. Our biggest export in Brecon and Radnorshire is our young people. We need to make sure there's educational offers here for them so they can study here, work here and live here. That's the policy platform I'm standing on, because I think all young people in Brecon and Radnorshire should have the opportunity to live, work and play within their home community.
Thank you. Rambo?
It's a difficult question to answer, really. You should just vote on what your priorities are for you as a young person. Politics has historically been, it doesn't have to be that way. There's nothing stopping you from standing for election. Plenty of the parties will actively support you, or people you know, and anyone that's interested in it, I would say, do just get involved, because there's a massive lack of particularly young people in the dialogue. From my perspective, my priority is the future, and that is going to be more your future than it is mine, even though I still feel like I'm quite young. My priority is therefore on the 1/3 of the children in Wales who are living in poverty. It's making sure they get at least one hot meal a day as a minimum. It's making sure that there's jobs and a decent education for our young people, because they're going to be our workforce of the future. It's making sure young people can actually genuinely afford a home and a home here, not having to leave somewhere else because there's no job prospects and the prices are too high here. And obviously, my entire reason I got into politics is to tackle the climate crisis. That is your future, and unless we actually start getting politicians voted in now, we've only got 10 years to solve this, we're going to fail miserably. So just choose and vote on whatever you believe is your priority, the future you want to live.
Thank you, Rambo. William?
Thank you very, very much for the question. It's really, really important that you do engage, because let's face it, young people have suffered badly enough in the last few years. Many of you have lost the opportunity to work and travel and study in 27 other countries as a result of decisions made by people many decades older than you, predominantly in the last quarter of their lives. I think it's really important for that point of view, and also because of the key issues of housing, of choice in education, and the opportunity to make successful life here in this country, to renew the democracy. I've seen, as I said a little earlier, the work of the Youth Parliament, the Wales Youth Parliament, where the quality of debate and the freshness of ideas is something that all of us could learn from. Urge you to take part. I've recently had the chance to meet 6 fellows from Gwynyfed, from Brecon High School and from Eisteddfodwen. I know the talent and the energy that's there. I'm sure you're part of that, and I look forward to engaging with you, hopefully in the future.
Thank you, William. Karen?
Sorry, you're going to half a line if you know.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes, so I'll keep this short.
I'll trade it.
Listening skills are excellent. I mean, as far as working with young people, or why should a young person vote for me, is because I've actually been a mother to 600 young people across the military youth service and part of Ricky Morgan. So listening skills are all aspects of life, you know, and actually helping young people to achieve, to actually have that ability to improve on themselves. Not a competition against somebody else in your classroom or whatever, but to actually improve on your own ability. Talking to the YFC, the Young Farmers Club recently, because obviously they have a wealth of curriculum then of different educational subjects, which is not taught as education, it's fun. And I was saying about actually accrediting some of those courses. I know they've got the Black Mountains College obviously now coming on board in Brecon, and my one aim is to actually, if actually elected, is to have an agricultural college, local, and perhaps the Royal Shogun if you're interested in arms, so that people can actually learn locally, agriculture, tourism, marketing, whatever you need. It's all about listening. So, you know, as far as actually voting for myself, it would be the fact that I would listen to you and I would take on board what you say. And I've got a wealth of experience working with young people that I'd like to share with you as well, because at the end of the day, you've got a lot to give politicians, and lot to give the communities where you live and Wales about your perception on life and what works. Apprenticeships schemes is another thing as well. I think should actually come on board, and I think they should. I guess it's been told to.
Where's my whiskey? Actually, I'm going to move on to another issue to do with addiction, and that is to do with the soul. That's the heart and the mind, and the way in which the souls of our young people is damaged by the way in which we approach illegal drugs. Now, it's quite clear to me, and it probably is to all you guys as well, that there's an enormous amount of drug taking that goes on in this country. We have one of the highest rates of drug addiction across Europe, and it's obvious that prohibition doesn't work. So to criminalise young people for taking drugs, and I have some sympathy with it actually all the time, because so toxic is the culture that we've kind of created, because we've abandoned what it is that life is really for, which is as much to do with the next life, and I'm speaking as a Christian, as it to do with the one we're living in now. So I'm in favour entirely of legalising all drugs, as has been done in countries already around the world, and effectively producing not a free-for-all, because I don't believe it's a good idea to take drugs, and I do recognise that to prohibit them simply produces rubbish on the market. So we need to have a process where we have a regulated process for drugs, like we have for alcohol. It's quite obvious, it's not rocket science, but we're afraid to embrace it. So let's be brave and recognise the reality.
Thank you, John. Stephen?
Well, again, thank you, Amelia, for your question. After 22 years in Wales of being run by the Labour Party, young people in Wales have a really raw deal. Compared to other parts of the UK, in Wales, less money is spent upon young people, less money is spent upon education, and significantly more money is spent on retired people. Now, we don't grudge that to retired people, but even so, there is a balance to be redressed. Your specific question was, why should you vote for each of us, for Glard in my case, specifically? And it's simply this. I hope that you'll be able to stay in Wales. It's a brilliant place to live and it's a brilliant place to work, but it can be a very difficult place to make a living. Jobs can be scarce, houses are unaffordable, and that really needs to change. And young people have got more of a stake in that because, frankly, they're going to be here for longer. And therefore, in Glard, our vision, which is to produce a Wales which can pay its own way, which is economically successful, which is stable, which is a good place to live and work and bring up a family. We hope that you'll be able to stay here, support us, and build that over the coming decades. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, what a great question again. And I think first question to ask yourself is, are my parents always right? And I know that I am not always right, and I have a 6 and an 8-year-old. So don't just trust your parents to get it right. We get it wrong, definitely. Secondly, is there anything you want to change about where you live or your hopes for the future? I'm sure there is. I'm sure you think to yourself sometimes, my God, I could do better than that. And I bet you can. So do find out, do some reading, and frankly, whatever party and whoever you want to vote for, whoever you feel speaks for you, that's the person you should vote for. Of course I want you to vote for me. I want you to give me your second vote on the regional ballot, actually. But I want you to vote for me because I'm here for your future, and that really is what the Green Party is about. So we are the grassroots organisation. We're all about people first, community first. We've got no party whip and never will have. We're here to represent the people and the community that we represent and nobody else. So we are here for the future. And think about Greta Thunberg, think about all these fantastic young people that have made change. You can do it. And this is just one of many ways that you can have a say on your future and your life now. One of many. So do it. Just go out there, go to the polls, vote for whoever you want to vote for.
Thank you.
Brave soul there to say parents are never right. I'm 55 and my mother's always right. Our final question, very wide-scaping one. It's from the Student Council at Brecon High School, and they want to know, what is your vision for Wales?
I will start with Emily because she's going at 7:30, so we'll start with Emily.
Okay, great. Well, I keep getting longer with first go. What is my vision for Wales? My vision for Wales is a very sustainable, equal Wales, a much more cohesive Wales, a Wales where people feel included and not excluded. I think it's terribly unfair that things like our political system, our economic system, even our food systems, they don't really represent the people that they're there to serve. And I want that to change. So I want people of all different types, backgrounds to not feel disadvantaged, to have equal opportunities. I want you to have a better life where you live. So again, community, Green Party is all about grassroots and community. I want there to be livelihoods, not just jobs. So I want you to turn up for whatever craft it is you want to do. I want you to be entrepreneurs, I want you to be excited about life, and that's how I'd like to see all of Wales working together with functioning, healthy environments, a healthy economy that's not based on the myth of endless growth, because I'm sorry, it is a myth. We can have a healthy, happy, sustainable economy, and that's something we should all aim for. But also an equal and more fair political system as well. And to be fair to Labour, getting 16 to 17-year-olds to vote is the first phase. And for that, but I want a single transferable vote. So we need better, more proportional representation as well.
Thank you, Emily. James?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, again, a great question of what we want to do for Wales. I think we've got to look at our economy in Wales. It underpins every service that we have. You've got to have a strong economy which has got jobs and opportunities for everybody, that supports our schools, supports our National Health Service, and supports all the vital things that we need. So we need to put our recovery first and put our economy at the forefront of all of that. We also need to have first-class educational systems. I want to see more money going directly to schools and not being swallowed up by bureaucracy, to make sure we can keep our small schools open, which is really important to me. I went to a small school and I went to a high school that was under threat of closure. We stopped that from happening. All of a sudden our community did that together. So I want to keep our schools open. And I also want to make sure we have a fantastic health service in Brecon and Radnor and the whole of Wales. The health service which is funded properly. And making sure that we have local care. So that's getting our diagnostic treatments done within our community. To make sure you can have your scans and all your treatments done here. We want to have a stroke centre in Brecon and Radnor, because that critical time when you have to go elsewhere is vital in your recovery. So if we can have a stroke centre here, that would be absolutely phenomenal. But I want to see a Brecon and Radnor in Wales that works for absolutely everybody. For too long, we here in Brecon and Radnor have been forgotten and neglected by a government which has only been focused on vanity projects in Cardiff Bay. So a vote for me and a vote for the Welsh Conservatives is a vote for a party which is going to level up the whole of Wales, provide first-class jobs, first-class schools, and a better health service for everyone in Wales.
Thank you, James. Granville?
Alright, I actually wrote some stuff down, I had a little bit of time. If we're talking about the future, let's talk about where we are now. Of all the constituent parts of the UK, we're the one where everybody will likely earn less and die younger than anywhere else in the UK. That is not something I want us to continue with. So if I look to the future, what do I want? I want housing to be a fundamental human right for everybody. I want there to be a guarantee of job for all those who are able, and I want a guaranteed, dignified existence for people that are. The whole reason I'm going into this is because I care so passionately about making life better for everybody, and we're failing so many people at the moment. What else do I want in our future? I want lifelong education as a right for all of our citizens. Education is a fundamental solver to many of the problems that we face. I want us to look out to the world, forging partnerships with the rest of the world. I want the world to look also at us and go, those guys actually nailed it with the climate crisis and the renewables and the spreading of that wealth, so it's not dominated by multinational corporations extracting money from us all the time. I want our bilingualism to be the norm across our country, like it is in many other parts of the world, because we know that is not only good for our culture and our heritage, it's wonderfully good for our mental health and our mental cognition as we get older. I want a dignified old age for all of our residents. But fundamental to all this, I want Wales to be a normal country. I want it to be a normal, independent country in charge of its own destiny, which it's not at the moment. Fundamentally, I want us to be a caring and compassionate society where we rejoice in even the small things and people helping each other. Despite the fact that it's pretty grim at the moment, I just remind you that Wales has always had a heart.
Thank you, Granville. William?
I just pick up where Gren left off. We need to base our policy making around a commitment to fairness, to the green agenda, and to a real sense of kindness, active kindness. It's a kindness that many of us saw during the course of the COVID emergency, the way in which our country and our communities have pulled together and looked out for each other. But we need to put that into the heart of policy making. One particularly important area for me as a Liberal Democrat is addressing the mental health crisis, because as we have gone round in the last couple of weeks since it's been allowed, it's been very clear that people out there are suffering and suffering really, really badly. And that is going to be a legacy of the pandemic that's going to go on for months, potentially years. We're committed to a 24/7 service for mental health. There are some fantastic initiatives, private initiatives, charitable initiatives, things like the DPJ Foundation and other organisations that work to address mental health crises in our rural areas. But we need people to have hope, we need them to look out for each other, and we need to build that into the very heart of our decision making. And that's something that, if elected, I will do my utmost to contribute to. Thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, William. Karen?
Thank you for the question. A vision for Wales is all about equality funding that actually allows us to develop Wales in line with the localities, with the local needs, etc. For me, I think that perhaps with Wales having 22 unitary authorities is far too expansive an area for ours, for example. You know, I think we should actually go back to the historic councils of Breconshire and Radnorshire, you know, so that we're actually working, or that, say we, the Assembly member obviously would be in Cardiff, but the actual councils would be closer to the heart of the people whose needs we are serving. I think as well for Wales, as William said earlier, you know, the mental health issues rising out of the COVID pandemic. I mean, we've learned a lot. Although it has been a very sad time, there is a lot of positives that have come out of it as far as community comradeship, actually working closer together, overcoming obstacles, barriers perhaps of communication, with, you know, people gelling more. And I think this needs to be done as far as the vision for Wales, that we have to come together as one and working together as one. I do think as well that for Wales, that yes, the actual the Senedd perhaps, I don't know if I said this earlier, needs streamlining, it needs reviewing, it may need streamlining, but obviously no more money to be spent on it, 30 extra AMs or whatever, you know. Let's look at it for the value for money, there for everybody. Wales itself, I think all the policies related to Wales perhaps would be renewed, you know, needs to be renewed. I mean, it's good when it's change of government, isn't it? Because it's time for freshness, for a fresh approach, and I just been given the old signal. So
I'll sell you half what I said.
John.
Much what you said, mate.
John, sir.
Okay, 100 years ago, Arnold Toynbee wrote a book called The Decline of the West. Where we are now, this is just after the First World War, we're in the paralysis of the West, and it's not just the West, it's Britain, it's Wales, it's Kingdom. It's paralysis. So what I'm saying is that if I'm looking for a vision for Wales, to be in the vanguard, not of safety keepers, but risk takers. Because risk takers are history makers. Anybody who knows anything about history will know that it's only arrived at in every day that we would celebrate it because we've taken a risk. Our idea about life has been compressed into almost nothing. We have to recognise that risk is involved in life. We've been deceived by science, and we have weak-willed politicians, and we're suffering from a serious malaise. The malaise of the soul, which is the head and the heart. So I celebrate Wales, the risk takers, and then there'll be history makers.
John. Stevenson.
In my answer, I'm going to reference a book as well. In 1957, a gentleman called Islwyn Cargalis wrote a book in Welsh called Wythnos and Hungry Dydd, A Week in Future Wales. And that book has just been published in English for the first time. I translated it actually, and it was published at the end of March. And what that book does, as I said, written in 1957, it sets out two visions of what Wales might be like in the year 2033. In one of the visions, the character in the book, a man called Andrew Powell, travels into the future and comes to a Wales which has become independent. In another of the journeys into the future which he makes, he comes to a Wales which has not been made independent. In his second journey into the Wales which is still part of the United Kingdom, the population has been moved off the land, corralled onto the coasts. The entire countryside has been either covered in water or trees. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but as I said in my very, very first answer, Wales could easily become a place from which water is taken and to which CO2 is sunk. We don't want to see that in Wales. In his first journey to the year 2033, the one which takes up the bulk of the book, what Ian Powell encounters is a Wales which has become independent. It's a prosperous country, it's a confident country, it's thriving, people start businesses, it's clean, there's very little pollution, people are content, people have good relations with their neighbours over the border in England and with the rest of the world and the rest of Europe. It's a Wales which is open to the world, which is part of the international community, standing on its own 2 feet, paying its way, comfortable in its own skin. That is the sort of Wales which I want to see. Whether we'll get there by the year 2033 or not, I don't know. I'd love to see it, but I do honestly believe that Bullard's policies are the ones which are most likely to get us there. And therefore that is my vision and our vision, and I hope you can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much. That brings us to the end of the junior section. Now we've got, I nearly said old then, but that would lose me a load of readers, wouldn't it? The slightly more senior questions. And the first of these comes from Stephanie Granton from Llyswen, who wants to know, after a year of such upheaval and uncertainty for small businesses, which has resulted in many having to close permanently, how would each candidate propose to reinvigorate the high street?
We'll start off with Karen.
Well, I actually going along the high streets, and it is quite sad. It was sad before COVID. There was a number of shops actually closing, but obviously due to COVID, there are a lot more. But it's good to see the work that's been done here in Brecon to follow. There's a lot more. The shops are open, and perhaps there are new traders in there as well. How I see it is actually, as a person not far from it has done, is actually creating more communication as to availability, actually making grants available for new startups, obviously looking at perhaps the planning laws as far as what can be done on the high streets, as far as, if anybody, buildings perhaps become residential as well as retail. So that would help somebody if we were moving to the area with their business, then obviously they wouldn't have to look at a home if they could actually have it as a shop. It's all about marketing, isn't it? It's actually putting it out there. It's actually, like with Wells at the moment, it's got a very good web page. I can't remember the name of it. Melvin Davis has actually formulated it, and it's actually about making everyone sort of. We're saying worldwide, but then the fact that that our streets have got a lot to offer. The footfall can be increased if we had more, like I was saying about the college and University of New Wales, more footfall. If we were able to be more innovative, thinking of ideas where we could be drawing more people into the towns, not just for shopping, but for other things as well. What else did I do? I would talk to young people, I would talk to the existing shop owners and those that have perhaps closing shops as to what do they want. That's what it is, isn't it? To find out why they can't reopen. Where do we go from here? And actually to do a study around the towns of what is missing. I went to Wrexham once on a course with the Revive, it was a course, it was a conference with Revive and Thrive, it's a company, a development company, and there they asked us to go around Wrexham, on the town, and there's a lot of things that were doubling up, that, you know,
Johnson?
projects, etc. Sorry.
It's a very difficult one, that's a fact. Everything at the moment is in the state of suspended animation. Partly to do with technology, partly to do with the way in which we emerge from this very, very lethal approach to what's been a grossly misjudged epidemic. But I would say two things are important. Obviously, tax relief is a major issue. And then the question is, how do the actual businesses create a viable product, viable service going forward? And then that will emerge as we emerge from what is a furlough-run economy at the moment. And we really can't predict what's going to happen until we get back into real life. So I would say simply tax relief and the reality of the actual changes going on is very important.
Thanks, John. Stephen?
Thank you. Yes, I think the effects of COVID on our town centres is going to be far-reaching. Not only because even before COVID came, all really wasn't well in our town centres. Some of the larger chains of stores were already under threats beforehand because of the effect of online shopping. And in many of the Welsh towns, if you look up the first floor level, the buildings are beautiful and the atmosphere is great. Nevertheless, there's a certain monotony of having the same chain stores next to one another in every town you go to. And there are some things about the pre-COVID retail world that I don't think that everybody would necessarily want to go back to. The way we see things, we want to encourage more in the way of local business rather than national chain stores in town centres. We want to make it easier for people to start their own businesses. One policy I haven't mentioned so far is our policy of having a citizens' income requirement flat tax, which is intended to make it much easier for people to start small businesses. If it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, well, you haven't lost your benefits because you've still got your citizens' income. So we'd like to see that encouraging small businesses in town centres, local businesses and local produce, whether agricultural produce in an area like this, or craft produce, or whatever is available. But we also think that realistically, there are probably too many shop units in Wales at the moment, and we would encourage, where it's appropriate, to see retail units converted back into residential use. We need more good quality residential accommodation in Wales, and we would like to see that happen. We'd like to see it done in an architecturally sympathetic way. And so we would like to see town centres in the future as much more organic places, much less uniform, each town much more distinctive, a good place to live and a good place to shop.
Thank you, Stephen. James?
Thank you. As someone who's never used 100 words to say 10 in a proper business way of getting on with things, I think what the Welsh Conservatives and I want to do, we want to abolish business rates for small businesses. That will give a massive boost to our high street, which has been under huge pressure this year with the coronavirus pandemic. That will give it a break and a time to recover from this terrible crisis. We need to reform the planning system to give our businesses more freedom and flexibility to change things to make their businesses more profitable. The Welsh Conservatives have committed for a rural towns fund, what will bring new Wi-Fi zones into the area and improve the street scene of our town. So when people come and visit our beautiful communities in Brecon Radnor, it's a great experience for them. We need prosperous high streets to compete with online. So that's what the Welsh Conservatives do, to build that strong economy which supports all our local businesses and backing local, reforming the procurement rules so we can get our public sector to buy local produce. That's what we need to do to support our high streets and support our businesses.
Thank you, James. Graham Wilson?
Cheers. Yeah, James has alluded to the broader issue here, that it's that business is fundamentally changing very, very rapidly. You find that in the years ahead, internet business is going to be by far and away the dominant factor. How do we counter that? First thing is we need to create a realistic or a greater tax for internet-based companies. But when it comes to reinvigorating the town, I'm not entirely convinced that scrapping business rates is necessarily the issue, the solution, because part of the biggest issue as well is rents. And my feeling is that a lot of landlords, 80% of our shops aren't owned by local people. They're owned by hedge funds and property portfolios. If we reduce the business rates, we might find that the rents go up, and then the middle class just get more money, and we'll have less money to reinvest into the civic projects that we need. What we do need to do is focus on making town centres destinations to relax, for leisure. We still need to reform business rates. At the moment, business rates, landowners are incentivised not to make the properties attractive, so it reduces their business rates. If we change it to a land value tax, that's just based on the value of the land. There is therefore then an economic incentive for them to invest in the outlook of the property. If the town centre looks better, it will be more likely to be a place of leisure. Most of our towns throughout mid Wales, beyond us, they're also thoroughfares for vehicles, and we need to be brave and go, let's reimagine what our town centres are going to look like in the future. And I think it will likely be pedestrianised and very, very easy access for our elderly people.
Thank you, Gandalf. William?
Our businesses have had an absolute devastating experience in the last 12, 14 months, but as colleagues have alluded to, there were already structural problems with our high streets, and we need to undertake a whole range of measures to deal with that. One thing that we do have as an opportunity, I think, in the coming months, is that we're going to have a very significant injection of money into our local economies through the tens and hundreds of thousands of families who will be coming on their staycations to Wales in the situation now post lockdown as the public health situation allows. That's good, but we need to back businesses. I was in Knighton yesterday, in Ystrygynlys and Brecon today. It's really encouraging to see what steps businesses are taking to grasp that opportunity. The idea of enhancing the distinctiveness of destinations, making destinations special, so that we don't have that kind of any town feeling that has affected our high streets in an adverse way. I think that's important. One important thing as well is to acknowledge and encourage the flexibility and also the innovation that we've seen here in Brecon. We've had a number of initiatives to create pop-up shops, to give people the opportunity to trial in different enterprises. Also, co-locating in a sort of cooperative model is something that we need to look at. And I know that both planning authorities in Brecon and Radnorshire, namely Powys County Council and Brecon Beacons National Park, have brought in and are looking at making their LDP policies around their retail cores more flexible. I'm all for flexibility, but we must guard against losing the retail core to housing development, particularly second homes, which drain the vitality and the life from our communities. I'm all in favour of above the shop living and of new and appropriate affordable housing, but it must be for local people, not for second and holiday homes that drain the lifeblood out of our communities.
Thank you, William. Time's going on, so this is the last question.
Whose idea was to have a Hastings in the garden? In May.
Right. It evolved, I think.
Before the rain and the roadworks finally scupper us. Question for each candidate from Derry Morgan. And this is one that you have to answer in 2 minutes or less. What experience or qualifications do you think differentiate you from the other candidates?
And basically, why should people vote for you next Thursday?
Is it next Thursday?
Just tell us now, you've got 2 minutes. Who wants to start? John.
You're looking at me, right? Well, look, I know it's a two-horse race. The two there, they're not stallions. Outside Aintree, I haven't seen anything more commendable. But you and me and everybody else that's not in that two-horse race can celebrate being here. I think it's a delicate balance in the October debate already between energy and experience, energy and wisdom. Now, at the age I'm at, and I'm an old warhorse, then the energy I used to have isn't available anymore. But if you've commanded an armoured tank in the Cold War, if you've practiced merchant banking in Africa, if you've edited and published a journal on foreign direct investment in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, then that's a kind of kaleidoscope of experience which I would hope is valuable. But I do recognise that I'm talking about things which are, in some senses, remote from what we're talking about here. So to bring it to earth, another book, and I get back to another book, and I'm going to go back to a president, Roosevelt. He said, "We have nothing to fear except fear itself." Evelyn Waugh wrote a book called A Handful of Dust, which is a quote from T.S. Eliot. "I'll show you fear in a handful of dust." So I want to resurrect the spirit that we have, which is to be willing and able to rise to any occasion. Courage is the greatest virtue. So let's celebrate that.
Thank you, John. Stevenson?
This is the point where I feel an imposter because I am not actually the candidate for the Lord in this constituency. I'm standing in for our candidate, Sam Holwell, who's a fresh-faced 18-year-old, who I've already said, very possibly the youngest candidate standing anywhere in Wales. Sam is very keen, he's very young, he can't offer much experience. But realistically, what I would say is this. You do have two votes in this election. There's the constituency vote and there is the list vote. The constituency vote in Brecon Radnor, as John has said, it's probably a two-horse race, fair enough. But consider using your list vote well. Brecon and Radnor is part of the Mid and West Wales region. We have an excellent candidate as our #1 list candidate for this region, a lady called Sian Kaya, Dr. Sian Kaya, who lives in Senedd. She's a medical doctor, she's been a consultant, she's been a police pathologist, she now farms, she understands the world very well, brings years of experience as a servant councillor as well. She would be an excellent member of the Senedd, and therefore I would strongly advise that by all means give Sam your vote, but even if you decide that you want to choose one or other of the stallions, as John put it, for this constituency, please very seriously consider giving Blard your second vote in this election and putting Sian Kaya into the Senedd, because she will make a real difference and understands the rural economy in Wales, understands the health service very well indeed.
Thank you. The reason why I think people should go and support me, I just encourage all of you to go and vote, no matter who you vote for. But if you vote for me, you're just voting for a normal guy. I'm not a career politician, and I didn't go to some elite university with some sense of entitlement. I went to college in Brecon, I went to high school in Senedd, I went to private school in Talbot. I'm invested in this community, I care about its future. I don't want to play political games with the people of Brecon and Radnorshire. I don't want to prop up no failing Welsh Labour governments. I just want to get into the Senedd to support you, to be your champion, the people's champion for Brecon and Radnorshire. You support me on May the 6th, which is next Thursday. You can guarantee with me, I will be here day and night, 24/7, to represent you and this great constituency and the place me, my family, my daughter, and my lovely spaniel call home.
Thank you, James. Randall?
Cheers. What do I bring to the table? Yeah, I did go to an elite university, but I was a working class kid who managed to luck out. When I was there, I was at Oxford, I wrote a thesis on the importance of education for young people outside the classroom, beyond exams, getting them ready for the real world. I think we're not making our young people fully able to compete in the way that the world's become. So I've got years worth of teaching, working in very disadvantaged schools. I've reinvented myself. I'm now a genuine expert in the renewable energy sector. I've been working all over the world as a lecturer on that. I think we desperately need that expertise in the Senedd, and I think that would actually be massively beneficial to Brecon Radnor. I've set up and run businesses. I've won Paris Small Business of the Year, so I understand what it's like to run a business. But equally, I've always run my businesses as not-for-profit. All of the profit gets reinvested back into the community. So I think it kind of shows the sort of person that I am, that I genuinely am compassionate. I've been 10 years as a political activist. I used to lead the Green Party. I led them through a general election. I've never been paid. I've never even put in an expenses claim. So I've got to care if I've done it for 10 years and not got anything out of it. But equally, what drives me to do all of this, I was in my 20s, I was in a car accident, I got a brain injury, and I was basically written off. It was looking unlikely I'd ever work again. And I made a deal with myself, if I ever get better, I will dedicate my life to other people who weren't as lucky as I was. So, you know, I think that's why I bring to the table.
Thank you very much. William?
I'd like to thank Andrew, Liz, and all the organisations that have made this evening possible. I found it a very enriching occasion, and to see the diversity of candidates, all with talents and with expertise. What do I bring to the table? Well, I did go to an elite university, but I went there from my local county primary school and my local comprehensive. So happens that it's the same combination of schools that my Conservative opponent also attended. And I won an open scholarship, was the first person from my comprehensive school to win that scholarship to study languages at Oxford. I'm a qualified teacher. I've taught young people for almost 18 years before getting involved when I read Stupid White Men by Michael Moore. I was challenged to actually do something for the communities which I owed so much to. I've spent the last 17 years in representing my community at a local level on town and county council. I've also spent 5 years in what was at that time the Assembly. I think we need a culture, despite all that's happening in Westminster at the moment, we need a greater culture of public service and a little bit less self-service. In the last 12 months, I've had a particular experience that has some parallels with what Gren said in terms of health challenge. I fell victim to COVID, as did somebody else who went to an elite university, having left an elite public school also, namely our Prime Minister. I had a slightly more extended experience of COVID, and I owe my life to the care, professionalism and commitment of the Welsh NHS. I am keen at this time, in all humility and with the readiness to serve, to put something back. I give that opportunity to the voters of this constituency next Thursday.
Thank you, William. Not quite the last word, but Karen, you've got 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for this evening, everybody, and to those that are going to be watching this tomorrow or the day after. What I give, 26 years experience, local experience across various departments in the county council, Little Morgan and Merthyr. The actual as a local government officer and as a youth community worker, manager. I've worked with young people, I've worked with older people, not the older persons, shall I say, in adult education. I've managed adult education classes. I've looked at developing the curriculum in areas. We've actually, you throw me off now, Andrew, do that. We've actually, what do I give? I give myself, I give me. I'm qualified for an education tutor and I'm adult education. I've got experience sort of working in with disadvantaged young people to be all across the actual social spectrum. I'm comfortable in my body, I'm comfortable actually with anybody that I'm engaging with. I speak plain speak. I've got qualifications to back up my experiences, and I'm a true person's person. I'm actually, that's one quality I do believe I have, is the fact that I can sit down and talk with anyone. I'm open to actually learning myself with others, because this is a journey. Whoever gets down to the Senedd, for those that have been experienced there, obviously we're going to be there together, we're going to be working this together. So it's all about actually having the experience of developing projects and actually evaluating and doing all the public administration work that is necessary. and I believe that I would never let you down. I don't make broken promises, and that's me. I'm straight.
Thank you,
Okay,
Karen.
thank you. I'm straight.
Thank you guys for attending. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, John. Thank you, Stephen.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Emily, who's had to go. Thank you, James, Graham, and William. Big thank you to Mr. Wheeler, Roger,
Absolutely,
Kate,
brilliant.
Mark, and Liz from the paper. Hope this helps people get out to vote next Thursday. And good luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Thank you guys for all coming.
No, thank you.
I'm
Really,
going to shake your hand.
No, it's really good to have
Social
that.
distance.
Really
Big
good.
thank you to Andrew for organising
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Very short notice and a brilliant job, I think.